Okay, hello everybody. How you guys doing? Um, Good morning, good morning. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World, What's Happening. Good to see you all here. Lewis the Hedgehog, thank you for joining as always. It's awesome. You are awesome. Thank you for coming every single week, man. I really appreciate it. Anyway, thanks guys. Off to a bit of a late start today. Usually I like to start at 11, but there were some, things that couldn't be helped. But anyway, let's go ahead and get right into it. So before we start, let's take a look at where we're at with our piece here. It's coming out. I think we have most of the flats done. So when you just color in, the flat color, that's what they call that, the flats, right? So now what we're gonna do is go through and add some, gradients and value changes and shadows and highlights and things like that. And maybe desaturate it a little bit. The colors are kind of bright, although it is the Smurf Village, so it would have bright colors, right? So I don't know. Anyway, but that's what we'll be doing now. We have like the majority of the stuff colored in. There's still a few little places like some rocks and things that we still have to actually do the flats on. So anyway, this week we are talking about Covidiots again because you know this is the pandemic that just doesn't want to die because people are morons and they don't want to not only not get vaccines, which will keep them from getting sick, but they don't want to take basic precautions in order to keep themselves from dying. Right? And it's like getting a little old. It's how long have we been living under these conditions so far? What, a year and a half at this point? Something like that. It's been quite a while, right? That we've been living under basically, you know, under pandemic house arrest, I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. It's not like you can't go outside or anything like that. But it is still very much true that every time you go out and interact with somebody that you don't know and you haven't seen in a while, something like that, that there's an element of risk involved now, which didn't used to be there, right? And that's really still putting a damper on a lot of things. It's still impacting the economy pretty hard. Things like movies and stuff like that are still suffering pretty bad. You saw, for example, the Black Widow kind of tanked at the box office there. And although it did pretty well in streaming to kind of make up for it, it's like, well, it wasn't a bad movie, right? And usually Marvel movies tend to clean up, especially that one since it's been delayed a year and a half. So you'd think, well, how come it did so bad? It's because people aren't going out to the movies, right? They're not going out to the movies because, they're afraid of getting a freaking, disease and dying, which is like, and that's just one example of how things are still pretty depressed, as far as like the economy goes. Tourism is like still really low, you know. And the thing is every time they try to reopen it, cases spike. So it's like people are making the informed decision. Well, I used to go to Disneyland every year, for example, and now I'm not going to go, and things like events keep getting canceled, stuff like Comic-Con, for example, got canceled or, various concerts and things like that. Other places are still opening, like you're starting to see conventions and concerts and that kind of thing, right? And people are going to them. And some places, depending on the state you're in, will have, say, a vaccine, requirement, stuff like that. But in the states where the Delta variant is hitting the hardest, all that shit's been outlawed, right? So that's so let's just take a quick little, update of where everything's at in this, going on with the pandemic right now, right? In the United States, so far, there are 636,000 deaths so far for the entire pandemic. That's including everything all the way up from the beginning, right? That kind of started to taper off a little bit, at the end of spring, beginning of summer, and it actually kind of looked like it was starting to go away for a little while. And then we got this Delta variant, and now, the shit is hitting the fan all over again. Right. The number of deaths are somewhere around 14 to 2000, 1400 to 2000 a day. And that's for the entire country. That's roughly where we were at right before last winter. So if you remember, right around Christmas time or whatever, it spiked really, really high. It got as high as 3,000, even more than that per day. So that's kind of where we're trending. We're trending back to where it was back in around Christmas and right after New Year's. Right. And the main reason why it was so high around that time is because, well, people ignored the advice to not meet with their families, right? Because they wanted to meet for, Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that stuff. So people ignored that advice and all got together and spread it all amongst their families, right? Well, now it's like there isn't even a holiday now, you know, and now it's just because the Delta variant is so communicable, it's so, incredibly easy to catch, you know. Apparently it's like whereas before if you were in a room with somebody with a mask on and if both of you had masks and one of you had, the Rona, you could generally expect to survive in a room for roughly around 30 minutes or so if both of you had masks and not catch it. That's kind of what the estimate was before. Now it's somewhere around 15 minutes. So if you're like, say, in a movie theater with somebody and there's another guy with, that, and you both have masks on, chances are you might get enough viral load in roughly 15 to 20 minutes, something like that. I don't have exact numbers. This is just something I saw on the internet. So it could be bullshit. Please keep in mind I'm not a doctor. I don't, this is just shit I read on the internet, so I could be wrong, but you know, um anyway, so yeah, it's extremely communicable, right? And that number, 636,000, that's just the United States. Around the world, it's 4.48 million. So 4.48 million people have died around the entire world of this, right? So we tend to focus, you're concerned more about our own country because this is where we live. We don't see it, what it's like in India or Russia or South America, Brazil, for example. Brazil's another hot spot, right? It's like, where, there's people running out of ICU beds and all that stuff. All the same problems we've got here, they're experiencing this all around the world. So it's like we're not the only ones, right? The difference is in the United States, we have a oh wait, that's the wrong. I need that one. That one. That's what I need. We have access to vaccines. And you would think that, if there was a vaccine that will prevent you from catching it, or if you do get a breakthrough case, you know, make sure that you have a very, very, very mild case of it and you don't end up in an ICU bed. You would think that, a logical, rational person would just get the stupid vaccine and be done with it. But no, the United States, Americans are not logical or rational. They are very, very highly irrational most of the time. And so people are refusing. And this is why it's still so high. And the thing is you would see in some of these states here, vaccination rates are pretty high in some states, yet we're still seeing the same, you know, um, we're still seeing the same surge in those states as well. So, for example, California has roughly 70%. It's like 69% or so um, vaccination rate. Right. It's pretty high, but there are 40 million people that live in California. So you know, 70% of 40 million is what? Like 32 million, something like that. Right. Somewhere around there. I don't know. I'm not a human calculator. I guess I could get a calculator out and check, but I'm not going to. So that still leaves, roughly 9 million people or so, 8 to 9 million people who are not vaccinated, who are still vulnerable. That's a lot of people. That in of by itself is as many people as like a lot of the Midwestern states, so like combined. You know, for example, Wyoming only has about half a million people in the entire state, so that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective as to how large the population is in California or in Florida, for example, something like that. Florida has 21 million people, right? But here's the thing, right? We're starting to see um, this time around, like this surge is seems to be mostly focused along the deep south, right? Alabama, Florida being the worst right now in the entire country. Florida is like has the worst numbers. Alabama is not far behind. I think they're like fourth or fifth, right? The other states, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana. So it's sort of like an entire that whole Gulf Coast, all those Gulf states is where it's hitting the hardest, right? Those are the states where, if you look at the average for those. For example, in Florida, as of yesterday, there were 27,805 new cases, just new cases in of them themselves in Florida, right? The 7-day average was 21,680, right? That's a lot of people. And yeah, okay, the population there is 21 million people. So you could always say some shit like, well, that's a small number of the population. That's still a lot of people to be sick all at the same time, right? The healthcare systems in these states are not they're not able to handle this, right? Um, Same thing, like for example, in Texas. Texas had 21,281 new cases yesterday, with 7-day average of 16,408. Right now, here's the thing about this. If you remember last year when the Rona was burning through New York and like San Francisco, right? And the Northeast and all that, didn't really hit that hard in these states. Although in Florida, we know for a fact in Florida that they were hiding their numbers the same way that it recently came out, for example, that in New York City that they underreported the number of deaths you know, that happened in elderly care facilities and old folks homes and stuff like that, elder homes, right? Because there was a policy of allowing positive cases to remain in these places, and so it just sort of spread around and killed a bunch of people. And this was like a major blunder by fucking what's his name, De Blasio, the Mayor Kumo, right, who just like retired in disgrace, right? Not retired, but I guess resigned in disgrace last week because of his sexual harassment allegations. He's gone, so now all this stuff is coming out, all this bad shit's coming out about how he hid numbers and things like that. We know that also similar types of trickery when it came to reporting numbers and stuff like that also happened in Florida as well. So when you look at things like the total number of cases and stuff like that in Florida, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? Because it could be way more than what they're reporting. We just simply don't know the facts there. Louis Hedgehog, governor. Yeah, exactly. He was the governor of New York, not the mayor. Thanks. Um, so yeah, that's the stuff to keep, this stuff to be aware of. These are the best statistics that we know of. It very well is very likely that the real life you know, amounts, right, are much higher than this, which is disturbing and sad. And I guess it's one of these things that we'll probably be finding out, just for years to come, right? There'll be whistleblowers and there'll be like, probably going to be some lawsuits and maybe even arrests, depending. I don't even know what the laws are around this type of thing, but there's going to be scandals about this kind of thing for years to come. It'll find out such and such, reported wrong, blah, 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 shit like that. That's just kind of what's going to happen. And it won't just be in Florida and New York, it'll be all over the place. I'm pretty sure it'll be in California too. Right. Um, Unfortunately, that's just the nature of our society. People need to, cover their asses, right? That's just what happens. Um, so we're seeing stuff like that. The thing is that, that seems really high, right? Well, let's look at, say, for example, California and Texas now. Whoa, excuse me. California and Texas now have still pretty high numbers, right? Sorry, California and New York, that is. So in California, there were 16,107 new cases yesterday, right? With a 14,881 running day average. That's still pretty high, right? You'll notice that that is roughly half, a little bit more than half of what is going on in Florida right now, right? Why does that matter? Because California has twice the population as Florida. So it's just kind of objectively true that it's spreading harder in Florida, right? Why is that? Florida and California also have very much roughly equal vaccination rates. It's slightly smaller in Florida. It's by around 5%, something like that. But it's about the same, right? So why is it? What is it that is making it spread faster in Florida than in California? You know, Here's another example. Let's you know, compare, let's say, New York and Texas, right? So Texas had 21,281 new cases and a rolling day average of 16,408, right? New York has 6,364 new cases, running day average of 4,795, right? Population of Texas is 29 million. The population of New York is 19.45 million. So, why is it that it's spreading faster? So the thing is, the difference is Texas is wide and huge and gigantic, right? Without a lot of very densely packed cities. I mean, you have a few, Dallas, Houston, stuff like that, obviously, right? But for the most part, the entire state is pretty huge. I don't know if you've ever been to Texas. It takes like 3 days to drive across Texas. It's massive, right? People live out spread out in suburbs and stuff all over the place in rural type small towns and that kind of thing. New York has like the largest city on earth, right? With like, the most people packed into it, with the exception of maybe Hong Kong, this giant city where people are living on top of each other, right? So, how is it that less people are catching it in less people are catching it in New York and California than in Texas and, Florida? How is that? Why is that? It's because people in Texas and Florida aren't wearing masks and they're not getting vaccinated at the same rates, as in California and New York. So, New York, for example, requires masks, in schools, right? Requires things like vaccine passports, stuff like that. You don't have to have those things in California just yet. It's up to the individual school districts, of course, right? Um, it's one of the things that they're trying to push for, which is probably not going to happen, unfortunately. The difference is, though, is that people in Texas and Florida are openly hostile towards these things. You see all of these anti-mask protests, right? A lot of conservatives live down in these areas. These are very heavily red states. These are people who are opposed to things like mask mandates on principle. on vaccinations on principle. There's a lot of conspiracy theories running around about vaccines and stuff like that. So they're not taking basic precautions in these states, while in New York and California there are. And it's just the numbers don't lie. You're more likely to catch it now, even though these states have roughly this, they have smaller populations, right? I guess maybe not New York. New York has a smaller population, but still, they even though you're like, it's like it should be the same. You would think all things being equal, it should be roughly the same, right? You would think so. You would think that, okay, well, the rate of spread of this disease, should be the same depending no matter where you live. It's not true. And it's like the only factor that could really explain it is people's personal actions and their unwillingness to take basic precautions, unwillingness to socially distance, to wear masks, to get vaccinated, to cancel large gatherings like, you know, church gatherings, right? Stuff like that, conventions and church gatherings, and to allow people to take these precautions while they're at work, or to work remotely, or to have their children go to school remotely. That's another thing, right? So you're seeing, or when they don't have them learn remotely, to have them wear masks. That's another thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that too. But we'll get into that a little later. The thing is that, so when it comes to the schooling, right? Let's see, how does that look? Yeah, he looks sufficiently gross, and doesn't he? Maybe put some highlights on the blood. Um, so the thing about that, right? Because this is really a lot in the news and stuff like that too. You're seeing a lot of these protests of people losing their minds because they try to, for example, enact mask mandates in a school, right? Well, the Delta variant doesn't seem to be discriminating against children the same way that the old school Alpha variant did. So that was always one thing that you would hear from conservatives, right? Saying like, oh, well, you have a 98 point whatever chance of surviving this, and it's unnecessary, and children just don't get it, right? And there was a little bit of truth to that when it came to the other Alpha variant. Children were most likely not going to catch it, and when they did, they would survive very well. And, there was still somewhere around 400 deaths of children, right? Which, in my opinion, is too many, you know, because, for example, during a normal flu season, there might be somewhere between, say 20 to 30,000 deaths from a flu around the entire country, right? Sounds like a lot, but it's not, right? And honestly, if there were 30,000 deaths from COVID, we wouldn't be in a pandemic right now. That would just be a normal, right? The thing is that, during any given flu season, under 100 children will die from the flu at any given time, right? And that's kind of just the normal thing to be expected. Well, so far during this pandemic, somewhere around 450 kids have actually died from it. So that's kind of a lot. That's excuse me. That's more than a normal flu for sure. But what we're seeing now with the Delta variant is that lots of, even though children aren't dying, you are seeing a lot of kids getting sent to the hospital, right? And it's because, children are not a monolith, of course. There are plenty of children out there who have pre-existing conditions, whether they're sick, they have leukemia or something, they have like an autoimmune, you know, disease, things like lupus, shit like that. Plenty of children out there that have these types of diseases that if they get, you know, COVID-19 is going to exasperate it and could put them in the hospital, right? And it just so happens that, we've kind of been lucky so far because the last variant didn't really seem to attack kids so much. Well, this one does. This one does. So you're seeing like a very large number of children and also a very large number of people under 30. That was the other thing. Right, that was the other thing that conservatives always sort of, one of the bits of misinformation they spread around, if you're under 30, like that's what Joe Rogan said. If you're under 30 and you know, and you eat and you're healthy and you work out and you're healthy, you have nothing to worry about. That's simply not true. It's not true at all, you know? And this is what we're seeing in like places like Arkansas, for example, where Arkansas had, as of yesterday, um, 8 ICU beds left. Right. So a large number of those people that are in those ICU beds are people under 30 and children. Children and people. It's like that these excuses don't work anymore. Even if there was a little bit of statistical truth to them last year with the old variant, in this variant, no, man, this one is putting these people in the hospital. And the thing is, every one of those cases where somebody survives has the potential to breed another mutation, and maybe the next one, you know, will be just that much more effective in putting young people in the hospital. You know, every time somebody that, gets one of these, every time somebody gets sick, that's what can happen, because they're viruses. Viruses mutate like crazy, extremely fast. Why do you think we have a Delta variant to begin with, right? It's because, the other variants, died off, right? And this one survived because it's highly communicable, right? And that's why. You know, the ones that weren't as communicable and also killed people too fast, those are the ones that died off. So this one, is like spreads faster and is a little bit less lethal, but still lethal enough to fucking put people in the hospital. Because this is what we're seeing. That's usually how it works. So it's like, how long before one of these people breeds another variant, which makes our vaccines useless, and then we're all the way back at square one. I mean, that's what could happen, right? That's what could happen because people aren't taking basic fucking precautions. It's kind of scary, isn't it? So here's the thing, right? So we are seeing this take root in the deep south, right? You know what we need to do? We need to just, I'm kind of jumping around here. We need to just start up in a corner and then just stay in that corner and work our way down. So let's start with this guy with the torch and the axe, right? Um, so yeah, we're seeing it taking root here. Here's the other thing, right? Last year, when it seemed to be attacking the Northeast and like California and stuff like that, and pretty much seemed to stay out of red states. I mean, with the exception of Florida. I think really that was also part of the reason why a lot of conservatives didn't really want to take it that seriously because it wasn't affecting them or their states. We know that that was a strategy that the Trump administration was actually kind of endorsing, because there's like leaked emails from Jared Kushner basically saying like, excuse me, the plan was that they were going to blame this, like they were going to blame COVID on the Democratic governors of California and New York, right? And use it during the election. That's not a conspiracy theory. You can look that up. You know, Mainstream media reported on that. So that's one thing we know that happened, which is despicable and disgusting, and Jared Kushner should be in prison for that shit. I mean, I don't know if there's a law about dereliction of duty when you're working in the government or whatever, but despicable as hell. The guy's a piece of shit. So maybe that was part of the factor as to why they didn't really give a shit that much about it. But now it seems to be, the big focus, right? The big outbreak center is the deep south, and it's like all of the south, right? And you'll notice that these same states where it's hitting really hard, these are the states that, for example, outlawed mask mandates in schools, right? 7 states so far have completely banned it so that you just can't wear a mask. Like you're not allowed to enforce a mask mandate when you send kids back to school, right? Texas, Arizona, Utah, Tennessee, um, Iowa, South Carolina, and Florida all banned mask mandates. Mm, excuse me. It just happened to be overthrown in Florida. There was a court case which basically reversed that. So DeSantis tried to basically ban mask mandates, and then a court overruled him. Right. Um, there was a big thing in the news last week where there were in Florida um, some school districts that basically were going to defy the governor. You know, and that's also happening in Texas as well. There's like basically in Florida, what it was that he bans mask mandates, right? So some of the school districts were like saying, well, no, we're going to enforce it. So then he said, okay, well, then I'm taking away your pay. He was going to take the pay away from teachers for, daring to disobey his order and, you know, enforce public health measures against the will of the governor and shit. And then what it was that Joe Biden stepped in and said, okay, well, if he takes away your salary, we'll pay it. Right. So Joe Biden kind of interjected himself and said, because fuck that shit, right? And, that kind of, I don't know, man. Joe Biden seems to be like, you know, not the best president ever, but he seems to be doing a lot of things that I definitely agree with. And this is one of them, you know. I mean, would Obama have done that? Think about it. Think about would Obama have interjected himself into Florida state politics like that? Nope. He wouldn't have said a damn thing. Right? And I think Obama was a good president, but he was kind of non-confrontational, you know, when it came to stuff like this. Well, Joe Biden seems to I think you know what I think it is? I think really Joe Biden is probably not going to run for election again. That's what I really think. I think he's figured that he's too old, and he's probably not gonna because he's gonna be like what 78 by the time he leaves or some shit like that. He's gonna be almost 80. Pretty sure he's not running again, so I think he's probably banking on like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna make it count, you know, kind of thing, and just doesn't care. And I commend him for that. So anyway, that's what's going on down there. There are also 14 states which have banned vaccine passports requirements, right? And this is just not at the state level, but so a vaccine passport, you know, when you hear that, people get a little confused and they think it means you can't move around without a proof of your vaccinations, papers, please, that kind of thing, right? That's not what a vaccine passport is. Um, Vaccine passport is basically uh, any mandate that says you must be vaccinated before you can participate in a certain activity. So, for example, it doesn't just have to be the state, although the state could say, for example, all nurses or all doctors should be vaccinated, right? Or all state workers have to get vaccinated, something like that. That would be a vaccine passport. Another one would be private business. If a private business says, okay, you can't come inside of here unless you have a vaccine. Like one of the fights for that was with the cruise lines in Florida, Norwegian cruise lines, right? Which makes perfect sense because cruise ships are like they're like little cesspools of disease, right? And that was one of the places where you know these where the Rona, COVID kind of incubated in the first place was on cruise ships. If you remember way back in like January of 2020, when there were like those people on that cruise ship and Trump wouldn't let them back into the country because he didn't want to, double the number of COVID cases because he's a fucking selfish, unthinking asshole, right? If you remember that. So he was just like, he wanted them to stay in quarantine on the fucking ship like an idiot instead of going to the hospital where they could have gotten treatment or whatever, right? So, yeah, so that's one of the cases there. It's like, well, they want to be able to open back up and make money, but no one's going to go on a cruise ship if you think you're going to die of a disease, right? So, perfect example. And the thing is, you would think that, conservatives and Republicans and things would be all over that. You would think that they would support, for example, the right of a business to enforce things like this. You know, they generally do. That's usually the excuse when it comes to, like, say, for example, libertarians will not support the Civil Rights Act. And if you were to say ask Ron Paul why he doesn't support the Civil Rights Act, he would give you some horseshit excuse about businesses being able to decide who they can and they are and are not going to serve. You know, and they'll get behind it when it comes to that. When it comes to like not being like being able to tell like black people and gay people that I don't want to serve you, they're totally in support of the states' rights and the rights of small businesses to make decisions. But when it comes to, the business deciding whether or not they want to allow people to come and spread disease in their business, nope, screw that. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to discriminate against people who potentially can put you in the hospital. So, there you go, right there. Just kind of goes to show you how much conservatives actually give a shit about the rights of the small business owner. They really do not when it doesn't match up with their political ideology. They don't really give a fuck at all in the slightest. No surprise there, huh, folks? Anyway, so yeah, in Florida and Texas recently, there were moves to defy the governor's orders to outlaw mask mandates. Right. It got struck down in Florida, and then in Texas, there's some ongoing legal fights. Three or four different school districts have decided not to obey the governor and to enforce mask mandates, and it's starting to cause like a big fucking problem, right? So, and all the while, the thing is, like I said before, a large number of children are the ones being put inside the hospital here. Excuse me. I've got I need to hang on a second. Sorry about that. Just have a frog in my throat or something. I need some coffee. Okay. Whoa. See, the problem is that, you know, the Delta variant is hitting children pretty hard, right? Something around the entire country, it's about 300 or so children a week under the age of 12 getting put in the hospital because of the Delta variant, right? That's the somewhere around there. That's about it, like the average, right? The thing is that children under 12 can't take vaccines because they're too young. It hasn't been cleared for children under 12 yet. It's just recently, the Pfizer vaccine just recently got approval from the FDA. So it's like still they don't have that ability because you would think it's like, okay, well, I'll just vaccinate my kid and send them to school. Can't do that because, kids can't take the vaccine, right? So the only real way to combat the spread among children is to have them wear masks. You can wear masks or you can do learning distance from home, right? Well, the thing is that, they don't want to do the at-home learning thing, right? Because number one, the first reason they don't want to do that at-home learning thing anymore is because last year when they did that around the country, they noticed a severe drop in children's grades last year, right? So this is not to say that at home virtual learning or whatever doesn't work, but you know, the kid doesn't have somebody there supervising them. Who knows who's going to say if they're actually paying attention, right? That's the thing. It's like you would think, okay, it should work in theory, right? Virtual learning, but children need supervision. Children need somebody looking over their shoulders and making sure they're not cheating or passing notes, or if they're at home with a computer screen, you know, who's to say that they're not just fucking playing video games all day and then not studying or failing the tests? And that's kind of what happened over the last year with, at home learning. Just doesn't seem to be working. Now, there may be ways that they can improve the system. And I really do think personally that at home learning is the way of the future, you know, for everybody, not just children, but also college students and everybody else. I really think that one day we're not going to have brick and mortar schools. It's going to be all virtual learning, you know. But we're a long way away from that, right? So until that point, it's like, you don't want your kids to not learn, so you got to send them back to school so they actually have to learn, so they actually have structure. See, that's the other thing about school, right? For children is that it's very much not just about learning your ABCs and your reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's also very much about socialization, right? And you don't get, what does that mean exactly? Well, it means learning how to work in groups, right? Making friends, you know, having social activities so that you learn how to interact with other people. That's really what school is about. It's just as important. That's just as important an aspect of schooling as it is the actual content that you learn, you know, because you have to learn how to act with people. You have to learn how to interact with people. You have to learn how to, and it's basically, long story short, it's training for, the future when you have to work at a job, right? Same kind of thing. You show up on time, you know, you do the work that gets assigned to you, whatever, right? You might have to work in a team. Why do you think like the teachers and stuff, they always have these team assignments? Everybody used to hate those. I don't know about you. I used to fucking hate team assignments when I was a kid because other people on team never fucking did any work. Right? I used to hate that. Well, it's because when you grow up and you get a job, you know, and you work for a company, most of the time you're going to have to work in a team with people and you're going to have to learn how to work with them and you're going to have to learn how to enforce them to actually do their part and blah blah blah, shit like that. And that's what it is. It's socialization. And not just that, it's like, it's making friends and having activities and learning how to be a normal person. That all those are parts of school too. So you really do want to have the kids together. And the other, besides those two things, the other aspect is that, well, if the kids are at school, then that means the parents can actually go to work. And that's the other thing. That's really I would say, the main driver when it comes to these red states, the conservative states, when it came to requiring in-person learning, is they want the kids in school so that the parents can go back to work, so that they can get the economy running back up, right? That's probably the main reason. And that's a valid concern, right? It is a valid concern because we're not paying people to stay home anymore. That's going away, right? As much as I disagree with that myself personally, that's just the reality. The reality is that, you know, they're not paying people to stay home anymore, right? The the rental assistance, right? The moratorium on evictions just got overturned in the Supreme Court. They extended it until like September. That just got overturned. So people are now at risk of getting kicked out of their houses again, shit like that, right? people are going to have to go back to work because, you know, especially in these other states, because conservatives and shit don't want to help them. They just basically said, fuck it, get a job, right? In other states like California, for example, the moratorium was extended until September, so there's a little more time, and they may even extend it even farther depending on how bad it is, right? But still, that's the reality. The reality is that, especially in these red states where you don't have a lot of assistance, if you don't work, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose whatever. So they have to get kids back into school so that parents can go work, right? It's bullshit, it's wrong, and it's counterintuitive to when you would think about how to stop a pandemic. But this is the reality. This is what's happening. This is the consequences of when you vote red, folks. Right? So, so getting back to the school mask mandates, it's like, well, we have to find some way of preventing it from spreading among children because, even though 300 kids per, week or whatever are ending up in the hospitals, or was that, it wasn't per week, it was per day, 300 per day are ending up in a hospital, and the number of kids who are dying is starting to go up, it's still, not as bad amongst children as it is amongst the general populace, right? So, the danger lies in that your kid might catch it when he's at school. He might be a carrier, right? Because you got to remember, somewhere around 40% of all the people who catch, who are infected don't have any symptoms at all, roughly 40%. And this is even the same with the Delta variant, right? So you may very well have it right now and not know it and never develop any symptoms and still be a carrier and still be spreading it around. And that's just how this and, pretty much all of these types of viruses work like that, right? So that's the real danger. The real danger is, well, the kid may get it, bring it home and infect his parents, right? And, you know, so the school becomes an infection vector for other people. So it's like if you have a child in school, your risk is even higher. And you're not going to wear a mask in your house around your kid 24/7, are you? No. Even though your kid might be exposed, right? You're not going to do that. You're not going to socially distance from your kid, be like, okay, son, you can eat dinner with us, but you have to eat it 6 feet away. Like, no, that's not going to happen. So this is why the shit keeps spreading around, right? This is why it hasn't gone away. There hasn't been a season where it just ends like every other disease or whatever, every other flu season, blah blah blah. It's been continuously going for frickin' a year and a half now because of this. Because it's like on the one hand, we could have all the kids stay at home and not spread it, but then we'd have to pay people to stay at home to watch their kids, right? Or else, and then also the kids like will suffer when it comes to actually learning. The other, thing is to have them all you know, in-person learning, but then you have this risk of it spreading around that way. So the only really thing you can do to try to stop it from spreading when you're in schools is to have the kids wear masks. That's really it. Have them wear masks, do your best to socially distance things, right? Have classes outside, spread them around, so that there's lots of distance between them all. Have classes inside of gymnasiums and shit so that there's lots of space in between things. Stuff like that. Well, they're not taking those steps. And they're actually in states like Florida and Texas doing the exact opposite to, you know, they're basically just trying to set it back to normal. They don't want kids to wear masks, the parents. And it's not just the governors of these states. It's the actual parents of the children, right? Don't want them to wear masks. They don't want them to socially distance. They don't want them to take any precautions whatsoever. And this is like why the shit's not ending. And this is why you're seeing in these states there it's being spread around. That's why Texas and Florida are hotbeds and California and New York aren't, because in California and New York, there are mask mandates. In New York, they do have vaccine passports for all kinds of things, for private businesses and with the state. In California, it's like, they don't have a mask mandate per se where all children have to wear it, but they're not outlawing the mask mandates. I know that, for example, Los Angeles County requires you to wear a mask inside of every business. All of the children in schools have to wear masks when they're in schools, right? And it's like, just for example, and that's why it's not spreading around as fast as it is in Texas and Florida and Louisiana and Alabama, because they went around and fucking outlawed all this shit. So it's kind of like they're doing the exact opposite of what's actually required, of what really needs to be done. And then they're wondering why, for example, Alabama runs out of ICU beds, right? It's ridiculous. And the thing is, we know masks work. They work. We've known about basically the germ theory of, disease for what, 200 years now or something? When did Louis Pasteur, when was that? What, 1860s, some shit like that. So, what, 150 years, right? We've known that germs actually spread. We know how germs spread, you know. We know how you get infected, and having a physical barrier in front of your face, we know that that's effective as well. It's somewhere around you're 80% less likely to spread it around if you wear a mask, right? The way it works is that both people have to wear it. And this is the thing that you'll hear. You'll hear things like the conservatives and stuff will completely just, the anti-maskers. I don't want to say conservatives, but it seems to be true. It seems to be mostly conservatives. But, the anti-maskers and stuff will say shit like, well, the mask doesn't protect you. The mask, if you can still smell when you're wearing the mask, that means that, you know, the virus is getting in and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because the mask protects other people from you. This is why surgeons wear masks, right? When they're working on open heart surgery, or for example, it's so that they don't infect the patient. So if both people are wearing a mask, there's a barrier preventing them from spreading, water droplets or whatever, right? And since most people that actually are infected don't show any symptoms in the first place, then you have no idea of knowing if you're actually infected or not. So you could be spreading shit around and not even knowing. And that's how masks work, and they kind of refuse to fucking believe it no matter how many times you tell them. There should be some blood under this rock right here. So let's see. Let's just a little bit. I don't need to make massively huge pools of blood, but right. There would be some that would seep out here. Just a little. Poor Smurfs. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll call this like the Smurfs. I don't know. The Smurfs kind of seem to be getting their given as bad as they're getting here, though. So anyway, let's see. So let's see. Where were we? Where were we? Blah blah blah. Kids want to go back to school. I got a bunch of notes here. So I want to show you guys a couple of things here. I need to take a break because my hand hurts. But here's a couple of maps. I really love it. I love to show maps. This is from, let me go ahead and put this down in the chat so you guys can follow along here. Here's the first thing I'm going to show you guys. This is the US COVID-19 tracker. See your state's progress. So you can see vaccines by state, right? So here we have the percentage. Basically, the lighter green it is, the less of the population have gotten at least one dose. Right. So you'll see here up in the Pacific, or the Atlantic Northeast here, right? Pretty much a lot of heavy, vaccinations around here. Massachusetts 75, that's a lot. Maine 71, New York almost what 66, 67%. Same along the west coast, California 68, almost 69, right? 63, blah blah blah. Keep in mind, even though that is like, let's round that up to 70%. You can see the population is at 40 million, so that leaves millions and millions of people who are not vaccinated still. So that's why it's still spreading around in these states as well. So just because your state has a high vaccination rate doesn't mean you're safe if you're not vaccinated. They have not hit that herd immunity just yet. But you can also see down here in the south, this is where the main, outbreak is at. And even though Florida has a pretty high vaccination rate, in Texas, roughly half, 56%, lots of these states, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, right? Louisiana, right around here. Arkansas, where's Arkansas at? Arkansas is over here. Not so high, right? So, the thing is, the saving grace is that they have lower populations. Yeah, okay, so there's only, not even 5 million people in Louisiana, but still half of that still leaves about what, almost 2.5 million people who are not vaccinated. That's plenty of people to spread around a disease. Same thing in Texas, 56% of 28 million is right around 11, 11 million or so. 11 million, 12 million, plenty of people to get a disease. Same thing in Florida, that's about 7, 8 million people that could still get, so this is why it's still spreading around in these states here, man. Spread, take that, the fact that they have lower vaccination rates and then also don't want to have masks and also don't want to, do at home learning, right? And also don't want to cancel things like large church gatherings, right? And they want to force people to go back to work where they're not allowed to wear masks at work either. And it, doesn't take a lot to see, to add 2 plus 2 to get 5 there, right? Here's another one. This is a school mandates mask. So you can see here, I'll put this down in the this is from USA Today. I kind of like this. Like USA Today itself is kind of a BS you know, media source. It's very corporate friendly, but they do have these nice little maps like this where you can see each state if they have a mask requirement, if they have no mask mandate, if the mask mandates are banned, and you can see these are the states where it's banned here, right? Oklahoma, Texas. It was banned in Florida, but if you see, you can actually click on it and it'll give you the actual what's going on in that state. So DeSantis actually did do an executive order and it got overruled by a judge. So, and then you can see, so it's actually kind of a nice little resource here in order to check out like where you're at in your state and where it's at around the country. And you can see down in these areas down here, this is where it's like, all the other, all these states down here, they've done things like they've banned vaccine mandates. They're not enforcing mask mandates. They have look at that, 37%. They have very low numbers of vaccinations. So, it's kind of no wonder why it's spreading around down there. Let's see here. Okay, so where are we at? 12:30. Shit, really? 12:30? Time flies, man. All right, well, there is one other thing I want to talk about before we end it. I think we will have enough time to get to all this. Let's see. So what's going on now is since these people, right? Since the Covidiots, I guess is what they're called now, right? The people who refuse to take vaccines and they refuse to take masks and stuff like that, you know, conspiracy theorists mainly, you're starting to see these sort of alternative medicine conspiracy nut whack jobs kind of take over the conversation on, you know, social media, Facebook and Twitter, stuff like that. And you have these anti-mask, anti-vaccination groups who are turning towards things like, natural medicine cures. Right. Um, these are the same kind of people who will, for example, drink urine, right? Because they read in a blog somewhere that, you get natural antibodies from your own urine, shit like that. These same types of people. Not just them. It's also kind of blended over into the anti-mask, you know, um, Donald Trump really won the election crowd, right? I really do think a lot of these people are anti-vaccine, anti-mask because they're doing it because they don't like Democrats, they don't like Joe Biden. I really do think a big part of that is in there, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories, like you mentioned earlier, Lewis, in the comment about nanotechnology. Yeah, we'll talk about that. You know, people who lots of because there was already a very large contingent of anti-vaccine people even before. I mean, the anti-vaccine movement goes back years. And we could talk about where that all started and the phony baloney studies that link autism and vaccines and shit like that. We could talk about that kind of thing. That might be a good thing for a stream in the future. Just all about anti-vaxxers, right? It'd be very relevant to today, right? Um, so what you're seeing now is like, well, but it's undeniable. It's undeniable that hundreds of thousands of people have died and are dying, and we keep seeing over and over and over on social media and stuff like that. You'll see anti-masker people who are posting anti-vaccine, anti-mask vax stuff, and then they end up dead a week later. And that's happening over and over and over. There was a case last week of you know, what was it? Let's see. There was a case last week of a real famous, God, what was that guy's name? Talk show host, right? The conservative talk show host guy who like ended up in the ICU and then died. I didn't write his name down, but he was, and that's like not the first time that's happened. It keeps happening over and over and over, where you get preachers who are like anti-vax and all that, and conservative talk show hosts, and you know various other high-profile anti-vax people who keep dying of COVID, right? One that I saw last week was this one. This was actually funny. This is from, well, and when I say funny, I mean in a kind of like, oh God, you know, existential dread kind of funny, right? Let's see. God damn it, close. Go away, close. Okay. This is from Ross Story. I just put the story down there. Georgia cop, close that. Georgia cop who pushed people to take horse dewormer instead of vaccine dies from COVID. There we go, right here. This is a pretty interesting read. Um, Not going to go through the whole thing, but there are a couple of little bits that are very interesting here. Basically, he's a guy that posted a bunch of memes. One thing I wanted to show here, August 14th, August 14th is less than 2 weeks ago. Manning posted a meme that stated, "If we lose on vaccines, we will completely lose our right to sovereignty over our own bodies." Got a little bit of that sovereign citizen shit going on in there. And it also looks like he was taking horse dewormer, ivermectin. The same day, Manning informed his friends that Wayne Feed and Seed has some liquid and pest ivermectin. Get it while supplies last. Right. So ivermectin is a bunch of. Let's go ahead and close that. Anyway, that's an interesting read to kind of get into the mindset of what's going on with these people. Um, Ivermectin is another bullshit drug that the conservatives are passing around instead of taking, a vaccine that has been tested on at this point more than 100 million people and has been proven to work. They want to take shit like horse dewormers. So remember last year when it went through all the social media and stuff after Donald Trump told people to like take hydroxychloroquine, and then people started stocking up on that, and like then there was a spike in poison control centers around the country when people were like drinking fishbowl cleaner and shit, right? Because it has hydroxychloroquine in it, and like one guy actually died because the president told him to drink this fucking shit. Remember that? Yeah, that never stopped. You would think like, oh, after that happened, after somebody actually poisoned themselves drinking fucking fishbowl cleaner because, President fucking sphincter mouth McBurger fuck told him to, you would think that would be over with. But nope, still going, and it's just moved. And the thing is, the hydroxychloroquine like misinformation is still out there. There's still people taking that shit, right? But now there's other drugs too. Now we have the big one that everybody wants is this ivermectin, which is shit that you give to horses and livestock to get rid of worms. It's a dewormer, right? It's so that they removes parasites and bacteria and stuff like that. Well, COVID-19 is not a worm. Right? It's a virus, so it doesn't work on viruses. And that's what I don't understand. It's like, so one of the things that, one of the things that the conservatives and the anti-maskers and vaccine deniers and shit will say is that, well, you know, these vaccines were rushed and they're not approved by the FDA. We don't know what's in them. Well, first off, the Pfizer one just got approved, so that excuse gets thrown right out the window, and you're already starting to see them like moving the goalposts and stuff. Right. But they will, and the other thing, like I just said, is that so far, 100 million people, like more than 100 million people, if you count the entire world, the entire world, right? More than 100 million people have already taken this vaccine. So it's like, and there have been people who have died after they've taken it. There have actually been some adverse effects as well. And we know, for example, that there's been some breakthrough cases of people who have actually died after they take the vaccine, somewhere around 125,000, right? Well, that is 125,000 out of, you know, 164 million people in this country alone who have been vaccinated. That comes out to 0.08%, right? That is lower than the risk of actually dying from, you know, COVID-19 itself. So that's another thing that you hear from conservatives. They say, "Oh, it only has a point, 2% risk of like dying when you actually get it." Well, the risk of dying of the vaccine is actually lower than the risk of dying of COVID in the first place, right? So that argument gets thrown right out the window as well. So it's like, so why not just take the goddamn vaccine, right? When it has such an incredibly high rate, and that's the thing, high rate of success. And all those people that died after they took it, they died of COVID because they're over the age of 65, right? That's where the majority of these cases. And when I say the majority, it's like 99%. It's not just like the majority, 51% of no, 99% of the people who died after being vaccinated were over 65. It's because when you're old and stuff like that, and you have other pre-existing conditions, even a mild case of this shit can kill you, right? And that's the thing is that a breakthrough case will be something it'll be very, very mild the majority of the time. You won't even get a fever. It'll be something like a runny nose and a sore throat, and it'll feel just like a normal cold. That's what a breakthrough case is with, with this vaccine, right? And it's kind of unbelievable. So they still, but they're using the fact that there are breakthrough cases as a reason to not get it. And it's like, well, there are breakthrough cases also with every vaccine. Just because you get a flu vaccine, for example, doesn't mean that you'll never catch the flu, right? It just means that when you get the flu, it won't be as bad, it won't last as long, right? And you'll be less likely to be, put in the hospital because of it. You're less likely to die of pneumonia because of the flu. That's how you die, by the way, from the flu. Your lungs fill up with fluid. You die of pneumonia, right? So stuff like that, right? That's less likely to happen when you're vaccinated. It's just this is the science backed up by, at this point, more than a century of, you know, data. But they don't care about that shit. They're more willing to take shit that's made for horses, you know, and sheep and cattle than to like take a vaccine because I don't know, I guess it pones the libs or some shit like that. It's kind of unbelievable. The thing about ivermectin is that it is, of course, toxic, you know, causes diarrhea. Um, People are taking it. It's like they're mixing it in with jelly and eating it with toast. That's how they take ivermectin. It's like, what drug out there do you mix with fucking jelly and eat on toast? I don't understand that shit either. I haven't, admittedly, have never been to the hospital, for an extended stay ever in my entire life, so I don't know. Is that how they usually give you drugs? Do they usually say, "Hey, it's time for your meds. Mix it in with this peanut butter and jelly sandwich and eat it"? It doesn't seem to really work that way. Uh, Unbelievable. So there's another bullshit drug that people are that are taking as well. This is chlorine dioxide, right? Which chlorine dioxide is a gas that is used to purify water. Very similar to bleach. It is also highly toxic. Uh, Chlorine dioxide can lead to diarrhea and severe vomiting, low blood cell counts, low blood pressure due to dehydration and respiratory failure, changes to the electrical activity in the heart, and which could, result in heart arrhythmia or a heart attack, and then also acute liver failure. So that's what you can get from chlorine dioxide. So we're seeing a spike in that shit all around the country as well. The misinformation about chlorine dioxide is actually goes all the way back to um, last spring, right? And the thing is, it's not just in the United States where people pick this shit up. This is because of the nature of social media. Somebody in Russia or South America can start spreading around this type of misinformation, and it's only a matter of time before it hits the U.S., right? Which seems to be what happened with chlorine dioxide. On a side note, I can't help but wonder if some of this misinformation is being fed to us by Russian troll farms, you know? Because we know those things still exist, right? We know those were a factor in the 2016 election. And as far as, like, say, a counter, like, propaganda, like a propaganda, I guess, endeavor, program goes, something like these, the Russian troll farms are like extremely successful. There's a very, very low cost involved into just hiring a bunch of people to shitpost all day, right? And we know that they exist. We know they exist. We know they're out there. We have the congressional hearings that have investigated this, right? And besides the fact that I've run into them myself personally on Reddit, I've run into Russian bots that lie and say they're from somewhere else, and then, right, the guy forgets to turn off his, like, I've seen it also like on social media, the guy forgets to turn off his location or whatever, and you find out that he's posting from fucking Moscow. I've seen it personally myself. I know this shit exists. And I can't help but think that, you know, there's a little bit of that going on as well. That these people might be spreading around anti-vax conspiracy theories. Why? Because it weakens the West. Now, I think this would be something that should be investigated. I have no proof. This is all speculation on my part. I have no proof that there are, a program to spread around vaccine conspiracy theories. We do know that they do spread around normal, ordinary conspiracy theories all the time from these types of troll farms. We know that's a thing. We know that they've kind of infiltrated places like 4chan and shit like that to spread around white supremacist stuff. Although they didn't really have to, they didn't really have to make a lot of effort there. But we know that, we know they do that on social media. They spread around extreme ideology and that kind of thing. Makes a lot of sense to me that they'd also be spreading COVID conspiracy theories. And why? Why would they be doing this? Because it destabilizes the West. It destabilizes the United States because now we've got an entire segment of our population that has equated not taking a vaccine with freedom, right? And it seems to be, like anyone who says that there isn't a political component to this stuff is fooling themselves. There very much is. The same people who are refusing to take vaccines right now are the same people who think Donald Trump won the election and that it was stolen, and they believe in that Democrats are a bunch of Satan worshiping pedophiles who drink baby blood and drink the in order to stay young or to hallucinate or whatever, and drink adrenochrome from corpses of slain children and that kind of thing, and that children are being sold in IKEA cabinets on the internet, shit like that, right? Same fucking people. They're the same people who think that vaccines have microchips in them, like Lewis the Hedgehog said before, right? And that it's part of a big program to spread around, to microchip the planet, and then it'll be, the mark of the beast. Like you won't be able to buy food or, go outside or interact with people if you don't have a microchip inside of your forehead or whatever, right? That's the thing is that, these conspiracy theories, it's not just, oh, the vaccine has stuff in it that I don't know and it might kill me. You're very much seeing people who believe on their side that the vaccines are a depopulation program, you know, that everybody who takes a vaccine is going to die. And that whether it's something that's like a timed thing that'll just kill you over amount of time, or if it has a microchip in you that they can just activate the chip and then it kills you, you know, there's very much people that believe in all of this stuff. They believe that, or else it's making people sterile. That's another thing that I've seen that you won't be able to have children after you get vaccinated. Hey, and Shoma, what's going on, man? Good to see you. I will read your comments. I'm almost done. Right, but that's a big thing too. People are afraid that, so you're starting to see posts on the internet and stuff about how, like, in the future, it's going to be very valuable to try to find a potential mate that hasn't been vaccinated because, then they won't give birth to some kind of weird hybrid children. That's another thing people think that the vaccine is changing their DNA and it's like combining their DNA with alien DNA and shit like that. And then they won't even be considered human anymore and all of this other baloney. And I wish I was making all this stuff up, but I'm not. You know, it's like scary, ridiculous horseshit. So before we move on to the comments, there was a couple of other things I wanted to show you guys here. So here's some incredibly bad takes by people, right? Just a little bit of fun stuff before we end it. This is Ben Shapiro. So what happened was that in New Zealand there was one case. This is on the 17th, so about 2 weeks ago. One case, and they locked down immediately. And Ben Shapiro didn't like that. Coming to a blue state near you, breaking New Zealand will enter a nationwide lockdown today over a single case of COVID. Well, the thing is that New Zealand has had 42 deaths from COVID, while the United States has had 636,000 deaths. And the reason why New Zealand has only had 42 is because New Zealand does not fuck around. And as soon as the shit happens, they close everything, right? They pay people to stay home, right? They enforce mask mandates. They do all the right shit. And this is why, for the last year and a half, things have been just normal in New Zealand. People have been able to go outside, not wear masks, be able to go to the movies, things like that, eat at restaurants, work. They've been able to do all the shit that we want to do and not have to worry about dying of a goddamn disease because New Zealand takes precautions and clamps down hard on stuff like this. There have since been more cases of the Delta variant reported in New Zealand, somewhere around 145 or something like that in the last 2 weeks. So they were actually correct to clamp down immediately because you don't just have one case. They have, one case reported. That means there's probably 10 times as many out there. And guess what? In 3 weeks, New Zealand is going to be back to where they were, and the lockdowns will come up, and everything will be normal there again. And while here in the United States, we're still going to continue to see hundreds of thousands of people get sick and die. You know, here's another thing, right? We can measure now exactly the human cost of not wearing masks. The projection from the CDC is that within the next 3 months, another 100,000 people could potentially die in the United States from COVID 19. And if everybody were to just wear masks, they could cut that by 50%. 50,000 lives. That's the human cost of not wearing a mask, of not taking basic fucking precautions during a pandemic. So whenever you see an anti-masker out there, that's what this guy is doing. You know, any anti-maskers out there are basically advocating for the deaths of 50,000 people who don't need to die. Anyway, this is why Ben Shapiro is a goddamn moron because he just doesn't understand, you know, he's not capable of understanding why this is a good thing. Let's see. This is another one that I saw on Reddit talking about ivermectin. I started the preventative regimen of ivermectin based on the FLCCC guidelines. I have no idea what that is. And I literally shit myself at the grocery store today. Is this normal? I want to protect myself, but is this just like the early toxins leaving or question mark? Plenty of question marks there. Yes, it's because ivermectin is a dewormer, and in human beings, it causes diarrhea. And you really shouldn't be eating shit that gives you diarrhea like that. That is not, medicine that is not made for human beings. And here's the other thing is that, the Rona virus does not reside inside of your intestines. So cleaning out all of your, backed up poop like this is not going to do anything to stop. So it's not even going to prevent the goddamn virus to begin with. So maybe this person have learned a lesson. Maybe she needs to shit herself a couple more times at the grocery store before she understands, you know, that you shouldn't be going to Facebook to get fucking medical advice. Here's another one. This is, I think, on Getter or one of those sort of conservative ripoff Twitter things, right? Notice how they slander the natural remedies to make them look bad. Ivermectin, horse dewormer, chlorine dioxide, bleach. They, of course, do the same to us who search for the truth on these things. Oh, you question the election results. You're looking for natural cures. You don't trust vaccines. Domestic terrorist, conspiracy theorist. Fancy neuro-linguistic programming in an effort to control your thoughts. So the thing is, Ivermectin is horse dewormer. That's exactly what it's used for, right? Chlorine dioxide is not exactly bleach, but it's used in kind of a similar way to purify water, stuff like that. Neither of those things are supposed, have any effectiveness in killing a virus. It doesn't make, they're not even antiviral drugs. It doesn't make any difference. And, like I was saying before, the whole thing about how it's all conservatives. Yep, you question the election results. So this guy is obviously a Trump supporter too, right? Domestic terrorist, conspiracy theorist. Well, it's easy to call these people domestic terrorists when they're like planting bombs and shit. I'm sure you guys saw that news story last week about the guy in Washington D.C. who showed up and did this bomb threat and it shut everything down and they had to like talk him down and all this other baloney. It's like, yeah, that guy was a fucking Trump supporter, right? I mean, it's like, fuck. Fancy neuro-linguistic programming in an effort to control your thoughts. Yeah, you know who does neuro-linguistic programming? Alex Jones. Okay. Neuro-linguistic programming is not as insidious as it sounds. It basically comes down to dumbing down your speech and repeating things over and over until somebody believes it. That's essentially what neurolinguistic programming is. They make it sound like neurolinguistic programming. They make it sound like you can just say things in a certain way that influence people beyond their will, right? Isn't that what it sounds like? It sounds like, oh, if I just like say this thing, it'll hypnotize people into believing shit, and then I can like bend them to my will and stuff. No, that's not what that really is. It's basically just a method of reinforcing your point so that people remember it. You know, one thing that commercials do, for example, is that they will repeat things 3 times. So if there's a phone number in a commercial, Larry H. Parker can help me, help you too, whatever, right? And they'll repeat his phone number 3 times and they'll show it multiple times during the commercials because the more times you see it, the more you remember it, right? And this is what politicians do shit like this too. They'll repeat stuff. If like Republicans are really good at this, they'll repeat the same points over and over and over and over, and they'll use certain terms over and over. And it's like, you know, until you start remembering it, and then you remember it, and and basically they set the frame that way, and then you start thinking in their terms, and they've already sort of set the playing field, and now you can't think outside of what they set, and that's what this is, neurolinguistic programming. It's not brainwashing people through the use of clever terminology. It's just like basically the same principles that you have in advertising. But of course, according to this guy, it's some kind of weird, brainwashing thing thought up by like Jewish reptilian space lizards or some shit in order to make you, I don't know, get a vaccine and like, I guess what, right? I guess force young children to be trans or something. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Here's another one. This is also from, I think, Getter. People comparing vaccines and vaccine mandates to the Holocaust. Always got to throw a little bit of anti Semitism in there. Thought that one was funny. Here's another one here. Sorry for the F bomb, but I think I like how this is under funny signs. This was on Reddit. Today's winner of the Tell Me You're a Total Douche Without Saying I'm a Total Douche contest. Yep. Yeah, don't wear a mask. Go ahead and die. That's fine. I kind of am starting to not care anymore. But what I do care about is the 10 or 15 people that this piece of shit will spread it to and who may die themselves because he was too fucking proud and free to, take basic precautions. So, yep, I think this is what they should put on this guy's tombstone when he dies of COVID in 2 weeks. So, sorry, I'm starting to get a little, I don't know. I'm starting to just not give a shit about these people anymore. And I know that's bad, and you shouldn't be cynical like that, and you shouldn't, you should always try to have sympathy. But I have more sympathy for the victims that he will, you know, inevitably infect the other people around him, the people who can't get vaccines, right? the old people who already got vaccinated and who may get a breakthrough case. The guy that has an autoimmune, problem and can't take a vaccine. I feel bad for those. The people that he's going to spread this to, but him himself personally, fuck him. Sorry. Don't have any sympathy for this guy. Right. Kind of the same way that I don't have sympathy for people who don't wear helmets when they ride motorcycles or who don't like put on seatbelts when they go out on their cars. It's like that was their personal choice. It's just in his case, his personal choice can kill multiple other people. So, tired of that shit. Anyway, moving on. Here's another one. I think this was from Twitter. A friend of mine told me that hours after having the AstraZeneca jab, he was sitting at the dining table when suddenly projectile vomited pints of black blood. Over the next 4 days, he suffered bleeding from his rectum, had blood in his semen, and came up in bruises all over his body. That's obvious bullshit. Nobody projectile vomits pints of black blood. You know how much a pint is? All right. Multiple pints of black blood. Did his friend go to the hospital? Okay. Bleeding from his rectum and then blood in his semen. So what? I guess as he's like projectile vomiting like blood and bleeding from his anus and shit, he like rubbed one out or something and found that there was blood in his semen. Is that what it was? It's like, oh, well, I'm bleeding to fucking death from my like mouth and every orifice, but I'm also kind of feeling a little randy. it's it's such obvious bullshit. People spreading. It's no wonder when you see misinformation like this that people are fucking you know buying into this ridiculous horse. I don't know. It's so fucking dumb. How do these people even fucking breathe? Okay, here we go. Uh, we have a few cases of accidental poisoning. Four admitted to the hospital this week. People, please don't take ivermectin. It's animal dewormer, and it's meant to treat parasites in animals. COVID-19 is not a parasite; it's a virus. Yes, at least there's people pushing back, but people don't want to listen to doctors and nurses and stuff because they're obviously being paid off by the Illuminati or some shit. Oh yeah, and then this was the cop. This was the Georgia cop who pushed people that we talked about earlier, pushed people to take the horse dewormer instead of the vaccine. Anyway, I just thought that was fun. Let's read a little bit of the comments here before we close it up. Let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. Okay. Good to see you always, as usual, Lewis. Thanks for joining every week, man. People are actually worried that there are microchips in the vaccines that can pass through the 25 gauge needle. If we only did have that technology, we could cure all diseases. Look up nanotechnology. Yeah, yeah, nanotechnology, like in Star Trek or something. If we actually did have that, that would be fantastic. You know, I'm pretty sure that they will discover this stuff years after I'm dead and can't benefit from it anymore. Nanotechnology, you could conceivably, um, one day in the future, have little nanoprobes that just sort of go around your body and repair cellular damage, you know, and could potentially do things like, say, reverse the effects of aging or, you know, kill little nanotumors that you get. Like, in your body at any given time, you may have little tiny microscopic nanotumors of like cancer that usually your immune system will kill within, a few hours or days, and they just never take root. And that's just kind of just what happens in your body, right? And if you had nanoprobes going around, they can go around and just like kill all that stuff. you know. So yeah, one day it'll happen. After we're all long dead, all the cool technology is gonna come like hundreds of years after all of us in the 21st century are long gone and unable to benefit from it. That might be a good thing. Maybe we don't want people from the 21st century living forever. Right? Maybe the people in the 21st century should die. So, how does that look? That looks a little, yeah, it looks all right. Okay. So, let's see. Inshoma, what's up, man? I've dealt with Russian troll propagandists as well, and when I wrote a satirical sentence in one of my DeviantArt posts about irradiated scrap metal used by cheapskate mad scientists, sickening. Yeah, they're for sure out there. I've seen them on Reddit. I've seen them on Twitter for sure. You know, because Twitter gives it, you can set the location of where you post on Twitter, and like sometimes it'll be a guy that's like, MAGA and all this other shit, and then it will say location Moscow, and it's like okay, and then you come back like 2 days later, and that account is gone, right? And it's like, yup, fucking that was another troll. And here's the thing about it is that maybe not so much Reddit, but Twitter for sure could put an end to that, pretty quick. They could, they know who's posting. They know which bots, which accounts are bots and which aren't. They can tell all this shit. They let it go because most of the time they just don't care. They don't want to pay the people that it takes to actually police this stuff. And they really should. There should really be a no bots allowed thing. Because I know that there are some people that make Twitter bots and they're funny and all that. Like, for example, there was a Twitter bot that would follow Donald Trump around, and every time he posted, it would be the very first guy to respond. And like it would say, the bot would just say, delete your account. you know, like that was an example of a Twitter bot. Or there was another one that would go to Ben Shapiro and just call him a moron every time he like posted something like immediately, stuff like that. So there are legit, non troll farmy reasons to have bots, but really they should just outlaw that shit. It's like I don't understand why they just don't. To begin with, they could easily shut it down if they wanted to. They just don't care. Um, Here's a question: how bad is the Rona situation in Russia? You never hear or read anything on it in the mainstream news. It's almost as if they don't want to mock a fellow white nation. It's as bad there as it is in the United States, you know, if not worse, because they actually have their own vaccine that they created, the Sputnik vaccine or whatever. Um, but yeah, the actual deaths and infection numbers are to comparable to the United States or like Brazil. I think Brazil is number two as far as like deaths and infections in the whole world, and then like the U.S. is number one, and then if Russia is not also number two, they're a close third. You know, the thing is that we don't really know because we don't get accurate information out of Russia, right? Because of basically it's a dictatorship that controls information. The same way that we don't know how many people in North Korea have been infected with this stuff, but we know it's there. We know that they're doing lockdowns and stuff in North Korea, you know? Um, Knowing North Korea, they're probably just like, I don't know, isolating everybody into a fucking concentration camp who has it or something. So it's definitely pretty bad there, but we will probably never know the extent of how bad. We just know it's worse than what they're saying. What else? What else? And Shoma, Ben Shapiro's extreme resistance against vaccinations and basic safety measures. Is this a desperate attempt to appeal to his conservative voters? Culture war against Biden. Is Ben a simple idiot? Um, I think he knows where his bread is buttered. So I would give it a 99% chance that Ben Shapiro himself is vaccinated because, even though he's kind of a moron, he's also like, you know, not that like he's also not enough of a moron to ignore doctors, put it that way, right? I mean, Ben Shapiro is, rather educated. He went to Harvard, shit like that. He just talks out of his ass about shit that he doesn't know about, especially when it comes to social issues, right? And he is kind of an idiot, so you can't forget that part, Ben Shapiro. But he knows where his base is, and he knows that if he were to come out pro-vaccine, that he would get a mountain of shit from his people, and he would probably get some people that stopped following him and stopped listening to his radio show and stuff like that. He'd lose some of his audience. So he's kind of strutting that line. In fact, there was a video that I was going to play by him where he basically comes out and is just you know, belittling the pandemic at this point. He said something like, it was in a recent show that he had. He said something to the effect of, it's not even a it's not a public health emergency anymore or something like that, which flies in the face of all evidence. It's basically him appealing to the MAGA crowd is what it is. See, the Ben Shapiro is sort of like for the MAGA people, Ben Shapiro is what they think a smart person sounds like, where he really doesn't have any unique ideas of his own. All he really does is just sort of prepackaged he takes like prepackaged conservative stances like social issues and shit like that and kind of it dumbs it down and explains it in such a way so that it sounds like it means something. But if you actually examine anything he says, like if you take the time to examine anything he says, it's all just standard conservative bullshit. You know, kind of the same way that Jordan Peterson does the same thing. Like he'll take like standard conservative social stances on social issues and then use a lot of like scientific sounding language to make it sound more like it's more intelligent than it really is. When in real life, all he's really saying is that women should like stay at home and barefoot and pregnant and make sandwiches and shit. You know what I mean? Like seriously, it'd be good to explore these kinds of guys. And you should know like I pay attention to these people because you should know what the other side says and what they stand for and what their arguments are. But I really I don't know. I kind of have avoided doing streams dedicated to these people because first off, where do you start? You know, Ben Shapiro has at this point, more than a decade of material to cover. So where do you start? Do I start with comments that he made about, Muslims and stuff years ago, saying that they like living in open sewers? Do I start with that? Do I start with him and his like sort of wet ass pussy thing? Like, there's a lot of places to go if you want to like examine the Ben Shapiro canon, right? So I don't know. But he's kind of a I don't know, he's a moron. Maybe one of these days we'll just make a video dedicated just to how much of a moron he is. Let's see. Another one from Nshoma. Weird how the mainstream media was all over the Floyd Roseberry, the attempted truck bomber, until he was revealed he was a Trump cultist, and suddenly there's virtually no mention of him afterwards. Yeah, yeah, that was his name, Floyd Roseberry. Yeah. Um, the other guy back in December that basically blew up his truck. You remember that guy? The guy that went out and had a loudspeaker that told people to get away and then blew his truck up and committed suicide. That guy was a Trump supporter too. Just so funny how many of these freedom-loving conservatives end up, you know, doing things like blowing themselves up or threatening bomb threats or trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan or it's just funny how many of these people that who are not terrorists end up doing all of these terrorist-like actions, huh? I mean, I don't know. I guess that's what making America great again really is, right? The redheaded Twitter woman is like everyone who makes up a stupid story. If someone was vomiting projectile blood, wouldn't he go to the hospital first instead of going home and suffering more? Wouldn't he go to the hospital before masturbating is what I want to know. Like, how did he know that he had blood in his semen? I don't know about you, but if I'm projectile vomiting and projectile shitting blood all over the place, last thing I want to do is rub one out. I mean, I guess whatever you're into, right? I don't know. Maybe that turns some people on there. Maybe this dude just has a projectile blood shitting fetish or something. That's probably gonna like get the Twitter bots to cancel my stream once they hit that part, but fuck it, who cares? One more in Shoma. Trey the Explainer recently did a 31-minute video on the reptilian myth and the very obvious dumb origins behind it. Highly recommended. Yes, I watched that. I watched it. It was actually really good. And well, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw the beginning where he talks about what was it? Robert E. Howard, and also that kind of thing. Does he talk about David Icke in there? I don't know. He might have towards the end. I didn't actually see the end of the video, but yeah, Trey the Explainer is great. If anybody of you guys out there have not heard of his channel, he's a really cool guy. He has videos on cryptids and stuff, but it's mainly from like, you know, the scientific view behind it, and most of it ends up being debunking things like this, and it's actually really good. But not just that, but also he talks about dinosaurs and like that kind of thing. So highly recommended channel for sure. Let's see. Dynacat loves me. I remember the explosion. I don't remember the guy. Yeah. I think yeah, the guy was a conspiracy theorist. God, when this was like in December, I'd have to look that up. But basically, this dude, it was kind of the same motivations as this other bomber dude. You know, very pro-Trump kind of guy. It's funny, like this other guy that they just caught. You know, the guy that because what he did is he live streamed it as he was driving up there. And one of the things that I couldn't help but notice was that he was complaining about his health insurance that his wife had this one dude that they just talked down last week, right? That threatened the bomb threat guy. And one of the things he was talking about was health insurance, about how he basically his insurance wouldn't pay for you know what? We need to make that a little yellow. His insurance wouldn't pay for like treatment so that he could walk properly. And then also his wife had skin cancer on her nose, stuff like that. And insurance was too crappy. And he was blaming Biden for that. And, I couldn't help but notice that because that was something that the Trump people basically enabled. If you remember, the Republicans, back when the ACA, Obamacare, first passed, there was a provision in it that said that there had to be minimum amounts of care, right? So your health insurance had to cover certain things. And because of that, the rates went up, right? So I don't know if you guys remember that. That kind of drove a lot of the MAGA crowd crazy because they're saying, oh, well, now I guess they weren't MAGA people at this point, but they were saying, yeah, my insurance costs more. What the hell? So one of the things that the Republicans did during that short period where they ran the Senate and they had the House and the Senate when Trump was first elected was that they removed that restriction for minimum levels of care. And the justification behind that was, well, young people don't use insurance as much, so they shouldn't have to pay for insurance they're not going to use. So people suddenly said, oh, well, I have this cheaper option to get insurance. I'll just take that. Well, the cheaper option, you get what you pay for. And the insurance companies were now able to sell bullshit insurance again. See, that was a big thing that for years and years and years, right, people would buy these cheap insurance plans. And then when it turned around the time that they actually needed to take advantage of the plan because they got cancer or something, or emphysema or whatever, right? Then they find out, oh, well, the insurance doesn't actually pay for that. It doesn't cover that specific thing. So too bad. And this is what's happening again. So for roughly 3 years, we didn't have this problem. And then the conservatives in Congress and the Trump people kind of brought that back. So if your insurance is shitty, if you're paying for insurance and then your insurance doesn't cover the shit that you need it for, talk to the Republicans, right? Because we had that problem solved. That problem was over with, right? And they're the ones that brought that shit back. So, and it's just so funny that it's like, oh, well, now I'm going to blame Biden for this. Of course he's going to fucking blame Biden for it, right? Because, conservatives and Republicans and things don't do any research. They don't they just blame shit on people. They don't actually go and find the root causes of what policy is actually causing their problem and who enacted it and who supported it and what law is actually you know preventing things from getting fixed. They don't actually give a fuck about any of that stuff. you know, because they're Republicans. So anyway, man, I think we're at 121. Yeah, I think this is a good stopping point. Um, let's see where we're at here in our Smurfs Oompa Loompa battle. Looking pretty good, you know. It's gonna take a little while to kind of go through each because this is actually kind of a large illustration. But it's starting to shape up. I think that turned out pretty well. This kind of gore right here. Maybe I need to put some more highlights on there, you know. But it's coming along, don't you think? You know, they not bad at all. I'm hoping to get this done in time for Monster Palooza. So this year, if everything still goes well, I will be at a convention in Burbank, California this year. Son of Monster Palooza at the Burbank Hilton. Um, so if you're out in California and you have time, please come by and see me. I'll be selling prints and comics and things like that. I'll make sure to remind all you guys before it actually happens. This is going to be on October 10th of this year, so that's where I'll be. Let's see. But yeah, I think we need to end this. So thank you guys for joining and all that. Really appreciate it. Got to go through my usual ending the stream speech here. So if you guys like what I do and you want to support me, please consider buying something. This is my SD shop. You can buy something here on my SD shop. I just put up this one. This is actually a piece that we did in the streams. If you remember this sort of piece here, I made a scroll out of this, so you can if you want to support me, if you like what I do and you want to give me money, please consider buying something from my SD shop. I also have a DeviantArt website if you just want to see my artwork. So let me just put that down here, DeviantArt. So you can see I have my webcomics up here. I have other scroll type things. Here's that same one that we just did, that I just showed you. So you could either buy it from SD, but if you just want to download it, you just want a copy of it, you can just straight download it from here. It's totally cool. So anyway, that's my, if you want to see my artwork, you can check me out on DeviantArt. I do have a Patreon with like 3 people on it, but still, it's there. So thank you so much for my Patreon donors. And if you want to do a monthly thing, something like that, there are my rates right there. And I'll give you free gifts and that kind of thing. So check me out on Patreon if you like me. Also, I have another YouTube channel where I talk about toys and video games. This is UCD videos. I do movie reviews and mainly toy unboxings. Been doing a lot of toy unboxings lately because Masters of the Universe Origins are the best things ever, so I have to do toy unboxings on those. Anyway, so if you want to see me say some, some like non-political content, you can check me out on UCD videos. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Anshoma. Great to hear from you, man. Thank you, Dynacat Loves Me. Great to see you every stream as well. Lewis a Hedgehog, as always, it's a pleasure. You guys are great, and I will see you all next week. And for sure, definitely 100% next week starting at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, not 11:30 like we did today. Sorry. There was just things beyond my control. I had to delay it another 30 minutes. But next week, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, same bat channel. I will see all you guys later. Adios.